Hello, my lovely people of the crafting universe. Today I'm inviting you to make an art journal page with me, and I'm setting aside my art journal to prepare the background papers. And I will be using two types of background papers, which I'm tearing using a ruler. I quite like the straight and controlled lines, so I'm using the rulers rather than tearing the papers just by hand. And I'm gluing it on the paper using heavy gel. It is my preferred method of gluing paper to paper because the gel is so thick that it doesn't soak into the paper, which means that your page will not buckle and the papers that you are gluing on the page will not crease and crinkle. And I'm using the gel prints from my stash, which I chose in these yellowish reddish colors with some turquoise accents or teal accents. And this other paper is just ordinary printer paper on which I printed animal images from a free image website. For a moment I was contemplating maybe using ancient cave drawings, but then I decided that it is too literal, too obvious, so I just went for very ordinary animal silhouettes. And when it's dry, I'm applying the second layer to calm the background a little bit down and to bring everything together. And I'm using 3 acrylic paints, the reddish brown, dark yellow, almost ochre, and raspberry red color, just for tiny little bit of accents. And I'm using a sponge to apply a very, very thin layer, since I still want the background to be visible. The aim is not only to unify the page, but also make disappear the lines between the papers where they overlap. So I'm going over the lines and then dispersing the color all over the page. I'm using mainly the brown and the yellow color and the red just for a little bit of accent or added interest. And when I'm applying color, I'm also thinking of adding more color to the edges of the page to make it darker than the center. That will keep the eye of the viewer in the center of the page and focused on the main elements of the page. And I'm not too worried about color not going underneath the spiral which bounds my journal, because that's just how it is. It's an art journal, it has a spiral bound, so let's leave it there. When that is finished, I decided to calm the background down a little bit, and I'm using white acrylic paint and a plastic card to drag a very, very thin layer over the page. And it just leaves not one solid layer of white paint, but little specks of white paint. And since I will later be using some white elements on top of this layer, that will bring them all together. Then for the contrast, I'm choosing some background stamps which have no particular design, just some background elements for added interests. So there are some lines or some dots. And to stamp them, I'm using a waterproof ink. Usually when I work on mixed media pages, I use only waterproof inks just to make life easier, because when I put on the next layers, I do not need to worry that the previous layer will smudge. So I'm adding the black stamped images here and there. And the last one, it took me some time of thinking, but I decided to add some images of clocks. Again, they are a little bit literal since we will be talking about time in this page, but I really like the stamp, so on it goes. And now comes out my most used stencil, which is letters and numbers, and the white acrylic paint returns, and I'm using it to stencil the main text of the page. I am an impatient person, so I'm of course not waiting for the paint to dry, but since I am applying a very thin layer, I can get away with I can get away with applying all the numbers at the same time without waiting for the previous ones to dry. So now just some letters left, and the text says 30,000 years. At the moment the numbers do not stand out much, but we will be working on that later. And this is a stamp I made myself of the Venus of Willendorf, and I will be stamping it on tissue paper. I'm leaving several layers of tissue paper on my table just to have some cushioning, to not stamp on a hard surface. That will make the stamping easier. And I'm using the same black waterproof ink to stamp the image on the tissue paper. Oh, love it. Since the background is quite dark and the tissue paper is transparent, obviously, I'm adding some white paint to make the image stand out more and not disappear into the background. I'm using brush and water to go around very closely to the image. That will dissolve the tissue paper and make it easier to tear it, and the torn edge later will disappear on the page and you will not see the tissue paper at all, just the stamped image. And I'm gluing it on the page using the same heavy gel. Oh no, not gluing. First, my favorite washi tapes come out. I'm using a turquoise or teal washi tape just because there is some teal elements in the background, and I chose two other colors which go very well with teal, which is this dark taupe or gray of gray color, and one more which is a copper color. And these washi tapes will serve as a base for my figure to stand on, and later as a background for the sentiment. So now it's time for the focal image to return. And I'm also going over the Venus with the heavy gel, which will make the surface waterproof, and I can do a tiny little bit of coloring on top of it without being worried about tissue paper tearing. So all the elements are on the page now, so I can work on details. I'm using a black charcoal pencil to go around the numbers and letters. That will make them stand out more and define the borders more. But I'm smudging the line with my finger. I'm not worried that the smudge lines are not very precise, because this is an art journal page, not a greeting card, so imprecisions are very, very welcome. See how the text now stands out, I really like it. But for the Venus I'm using white charcoal. And then I'm returning to my black charcoal pencil again to do the same that I did at the beginning with acrylic paints to darken the edges of the page, to keep the eye of the viewer onto the main element of the page. And to help this even more, I'm going around the page with black ink. And I still wasn't happy about the borders, so I'm using even a darker element, which is a black acrylic paint, just to draw a tiny little border around the page. Oh, isn't it beautiful? I was very happy about how it looks. And now the sentiment. I'm using ordinary white paper and these little tiny letters which can be assembled into words. It's easy, I like how the result looks, it's just a little bit fiddly to put the words together. And I'm using the brown ink this time. I decided that black might be too harsh, so I'm using the brown ink this time to stamp the sentiment. And so the sentiment reads, always been there, always will be. So now you understand the meaning of the page. It is to say that fat people have always been on this planet, they always will be, so let's get over it and move on with our lives. I'm contemplating for a moment if I need to cut the sentiment in half. Yes, I'm doing it. And then darkening the edges of each paper strip just by pressing it onto the stamping pad. And I'm gluing it down using art glitter glue, which is very reliable glue. And I'm finishing the page with the black charcoal pencil again. I'm going around the sentiment strips, only this time I will not use the finger to smudge it, but barely wet brush, because I do not want the charcoal to get onto the white paper of the sentiment. So this was the page for today. I hope you liked it and you understood it. And if you did, please press the subscribe button and leave a comment why you like the page. And I'm leaving you with some still images of the page. Bye bye.